So welcome back, everyone. I hope you've had a lovely lunch and you've really had the opportunity to network. It sounds like there's been some really great conversations out there, and hope you've had an opportunity to visit the posters, lovely posters, and also all the exhibitions as well. So that's really great. So we now move on to our keynote presentation. And I'm very pleased to welcome Kelly Vere, MBE, Director of Technical Strategy at the University of Nottingham, Programme Director, Technicians Commitment, Principal Investigator, MI Talent, and the keynote is entitled From Lab Notes to Leadership, a Technical Career Journey. Kelly will be reflecting on her own career path and how her experience as a trainee research technician at Nottingham and how it led to her current role. And Kelly will also be talking about the work that MI Talent are doing to support and encourage apprenticeships. Similar to this morning's presentation, within the allocated time, we've allocated 5 minutes for questions at the end of Kelly's presentation. So please save your questions to the end. And for those online, please type your questions and the room host will highlight a couple of the common questions that we can ask Kelly at the end of her presentation. So welcome over to Kelly then.
Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, come on, really? I know there's always a post-lunch lull, but come on, I'm going to have to try that again. Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, much better, especially for a Friday. Thanks all. A huge thank you, Hilary and the team, for inviting me to come and talk to you today. It's a real privilege to be able to address you all at this, I think, first National Science Apprenticeship Conference. So welcome, everybody, and huge thank you for the invitation. As Hilary said, my name is Kelly Vere, and I've been asked to give you, I guess, a little bit of a rundown through my career history. I didn't think I was quite old enough for a talk like this, but it seems I am. So moving forward, hopefully these all move on. Oh, they're not flicking on. Do I just need to? Oh, there we go. I think I just needed to be a bit more forceful. So my name's Kelly. I am the University Director of Technical Strategy here at the University of Nottingham, and so it's a great privilege to welcome you to one of our campuses today. Technical Director of Technical Strategy really means that I look after, I guess, the strategic direction of our technical workforce here at the university. And at the University of Nottingham, we have just over 700 technicians working across a range of disciplines, literally everything from A, archaeology, to Z, zoology. We have that workforce working predominantly at our campus here in Nottingham. We've got multiple campuses here in the Midlands, but also, you're right, Tom. All right, good stuff. No problem at all, Tom. So the majority of our technicians reside here at our campuses in Nottingham and the surrounding area, but we also have technical colleagues working at our campuses in Asia, in both China and Malaysia. So a truly global university working across a range of disciplines. I guess over the course of my career have been really passionate about what our technical community and our technical workforce bring to this institution, and indeed all our education institutions and research institutions across the UK and beyond. And that's because I am a technician by background. I didn't just dress up for the day. That's me at my microscope a few years ago. I've had a really rich and rewarding career as a technician here at this institution. I've worked in immunology, I've worked in cell biophysics, worked in optical engineering, bioengineering. It's been really varied, and I've been really lucky to work with fabulous students and academic colleagues, really at the cutting edge of research, but also, education too. As I mentioned, now I'm in a leadership role here at the university with a team of just over 700 colleagues across the institution. And for around nearly a decade now, I've worked on a sort of long-term part-time secondment with an institution called the Science Council, which hopefully you've all heard of given your presence today. My secondment with the Science Council really, I guess, enabled me to have a platform to try and affect change for the technical community. And I'm going to say a little bit more about that in my talk today. And it's been a real privilege, I guess, to become what I consider to be an accidental advocate for my profession. So I thought I'd start by showing you my first day at work. That's me in the middle there. Oh, okay. Yeah, I've lost some of you already, haven't I? I became a technician in November 1999 in the Division of Immunology here at the University of Nottingham. if I'm honest with you, I don't know how I got this job. I didn't even study science at A level, but here I am as a fresh-faced 18-year-old straight out of college. I really, really wanted to go to university, and I think back then in the late 90s, it was really important to do so. I don't think that's necessarily the case now, though my employer might not be happy with me for saying that, but I think we're in a different landscape now. But back then it was really, really important to go to university. But unfortunately, I came from a background where we just couldn't afford that. My parents had a market stall. It just wasn't an option for me to access higher education in the traditional way, like many of my peers. So I looked for any job, and I mean any job, that would let me do a degree part-time and pay me to do it. So I guess I was sort of in a bit of an unofficial apprenticeship position, if that makes sense. So here I am as a junior medical technician. I didn't even know these jobs existed in our institutions. I thought, I guess, as a naive 18-year-old, that universities were full of students and professors. And it never occurred to me that there was this whole suite, this whole workforce of people, who made research and teaching happen in higher education. I loved being a technician. I still consider myself a technician. I absolutely love it. As a technician, we are at the forefront of new research, new technologies. No day is the same. We make a huge impact on the students here at Nottingham, and there are 45,000 of them. We're absolutely fundamental to really changing, people's lives. Absolutely loved it. But it became very quickly apparent to me as I sort of, settled into my new role, that the culture for the technical profession within higher education wasn't always that positive. I'm not sure if you guys can read this cartoon at the back, but there's a couple of professors at the front of this cartoon who were saying to each other, I don't understand how this lab produces so much high quality research when it's full of bottle washers. And that's a real issue that myself and my colleagues have faced over the courses of our careers. There's many misconceptions about what it means to be a technician in higher education and research. And of course, many of us wash bottles. I've washed several items of glassware in my time, but there's a very special way to do it that means that the experiments will work, for example. And I guess the technicians in this room know that there's so much more to being a technical professional in higher education than that. What this leads to, though, or led to, is a lot of my colleagues saying this. They would say this, oh, I'm just a technician. I guess the culture in academia, for those of you who don't work in this environment, traditionally has been a little bit Downton Abbey. Are you familiar with that programme? Very much upstairs, downstairs, where traditionally our academic colleagues were the sort of elite academics, but as technicians, we were sort of the servants downstairs, just there to service their needs. That couldn't be further from the truth. There's so much collaborative working that happens in this space, but the culture still reflected this upstairs, downstairs model, and it led to this. And I actually really don't like it when my colleagues say this, because it's absolutely not the case. I guess it's quite easy when you think about the technical profession in higher education to see how we've experienced this lack of visibility and recognition over time. And as I mentioned, it doesn't make sense at all, because as technicians, we're key to everything. So key in universities to research and teaching, field trips, health and safety, and so forth. But also key to society. I guess a few of you may have been here, bottom left. Anyone? Glastonbury? Anyone? Can't make Glastonbury happen without technicians. Lewis Hamilton can't, drive his Formula 1 cars without technicians. Tim Peake can't go to the space station without technicians. You get the idea. We're absolutely essential to so many spheres of life. But within higher education, as I mentioned, we have experienced this lack of visibility and recognition. And that's been in higher education news, where we have a real lack of visibility. In higher education research, there's a lot of research done into the types of roles within universities, and there's very little done about what technicians bring to the table. In higher education policy, and in our own institutional strategies, where technical staff haven't always been considered. Or even visibility in history. And this is a picture depicted of two technical assistants from the 17th century, I believe, where technical staff are depicted in historical pictures of sort of science and the history of science. Our faces aren't drawn, and there's been some research into this, and our faces weren't drawn because we weren't deemed worthy enough to have our faces drawn, because we weren't important enough. So it paints a bit of a negative picture as to the culture. So I progressed my career as a technician. I went from being a junior medical technician. I studied my degree part-time. I still can't tell you how I managed to do that. I used to drive up to Sheffield Hallam from Nottingham for part-time lectures, drive back to the lab and carry on working. But 4 years later, I got my degree alongside my full-time student colleagues. And then I went on to do a master's part-time here at the university. And that master's degree was actually in higher education, not science. And I wanted to use that master's as an opportunity to do some research into the roles of technicians within our institution and within higher education to try and understand why we had this negative culture around us. So I completed my dissertation about university technicians being misused and misunderstood and thought, well, now what do I do? And so I wrote an article for a magazine called Times Higher Education. It's a weekly magazine in academia, which very rarely to this point had talked about the technical workforce. When you write an article for Times Higher, they often commission some artwork to go with the article. But as the author, you don't necessarily know what that's going to look like. So this is what my article looked like on the day it came out. And my article was calling for greater advocacy for technical roles in science and universities and so forth. I ran up to Blackwell's on campus to buy the magazine. And this is what I found. This is me, Cinderella, in the lab. What I was trying to argue in this article is that we absolutely were vital to the success of our institutions and needed proper support, recognition, and opportunity for future career development. Instead, they painted me as Cinderella as the lab. And what was quite interesting is at the time I worked with two older, very esteemed professors here, both guys. And from that day on, they really had a reputation for being a bit grumpy, these two. But from that day on, they were known as the Ugly Sisters. So it kind of did make it all worthwhile. I guess just looking back, it's quite interesting actually to take the opportunity to do this. I didn't realise what I was doing when I wrote that article. I just thought, yes, let's sort of, have a bit of a rallying call for how we need to give this profession a bit more support. But I guess quite naively, I was putting my head above the parapet and I didn't realise that. When the article came out, I was then invited to go and talk at a national conference for technicians, predominantly science technicians, but all disciplines. And this took place in January 2013. This is a photo of me at that event, looking quite a lot younger, actually. I was terrified. The article came out in November. This was January. It completely ruined my Christmas. I am absolutely terrified of public speaking. To this day, I hate it. It just doesn't go with it's not in my comfort zone at all. But I guess what I realised is I couldn't make a call saying that we need to give technicians more voice and then say no when I was offered to speak, if that makes sense. So I gave this talk. It was half an hour to 200 people, and I left that day with 6 invitations to go and talk at the institutions. And so I guess my accidental advocacy for the technical profession began. I started to do quite a lot of work locally here at the university. I did, develop new initiatives for technicians here at Nottingham, TV interviews, wrote articles, we won awards for our work and so forth. It was really quite the journey. I continued to write articles nationally, really saying, we've really got to invest in this workforce because we just can't do research, innovation and education without people like us. In 2014, I realised that we didn't have a national conference for university technicians. And most jobs within universities, most career pathways, all our colleagues are going to conferences all the time, as you can imagine. But there was no dedicated professional development conference for us. And so I invented one. I was given some really good advice to call it a summit and not a conference, because if I called it a summit, it would sound much grander and lots of people would get behind it. And it worked, to be honest. And in 2015, we hosted the very first UK Higher Education Technicians Summit. We had 350 people actually on this campus, which was amazing. And you may be aware of Helen Sharman, the first British astronaut. She came and was our first keynote speaker. And it was just wonderful. For the first time, we had an event dedicated to technicians. I was also lamenting at that time the lack of awards and recognition for technical staff. So, for example, as you can imagine, working in a university, our academic colleagues are getting prizes and awards and all sorts all of the time, but technicians were never put forward for things like that because they didn't exist. So we created something called the Papin Prizes, and this is a national award scheme that really recognises technical excellence in academia. And to this date, actually, over 1,500 colleagues have been nominated for those Papin Prizes. It's been wonderful to see. The summit and the Papin Prizes go hand in hand and take place every 2 years, which has been wonderful to see. It's really good. That attracted attention of a government department who asked me to be a poster girl. Never thought I'd be one of those, for a Not Just for Boys campaign, which was really about showcasing, technical careers to girls in particular, because we have a lack of women in the technical profession. So my career was sort of accelerating a little bit. I was still, working in a technical lab-based role. I ran 20 different research labs at that point. I was a manager of a small research institute, and still very active in experiments and so forth. And this advocacy piece was sort of happening on the side. But I thought it wouldn't be very transparent to say that this wasn't without difficulty. I had an awful lot of support from colleagues across the university, but there were still hints of that culture that I mentioned, that Downton Abbey culture that kept coming out every now and again. And I thought I'd just share a couple of examples with you to just sort of showcase this. I worked with a postdoc researcher on a project a few years ago, and it was a project that I'd helped design together with my academic professorial colleagues. We'd gone to a research council for money. We'd won £3 million for a big project in collaboration with Exeter University, and that project had money on it for postdoc researchers. We recruited researchers and so forth. This researcher had been working with me for, a week or two, until she realized I was a technician and not a postdoc researcher with a PhD like herself. And she said to me, she was horrified. She said, well, I thought you were a postdoc like me. And I said, no, I'm a technician. And she was sort of, how could you possibly be a technician? And she said, where I come from, we don't wipe our shoes on people like you. So that was quite a, sad moment, actually. I can remember exactly where I was at the time and so forth. But, that was this sort of current that was, this culture that was running through higher education with regards to technical roles. A very senior academic in the university told me that because he'd heard that I was being invited to give talks, like our academic colleagues are, for example, that I should get back in my box, actually, because I was just a technician. And who did I think I was? I should be at that lab bench generating data. And I must stress that on the whole, this university and my colleagues have been tremendously supportive for all of the work I've done nationally and so forth to really try and improve professional development and opportunity for the technical workforce. But these two examples really did strengthen my resolve. And there are a few more, but I don't want to be overly negative, but it's just to give you an idea of how tricky it is to try and create culture change, if that makes sense. So moving on to, around 2014, 2015 still, and the work that I've been doing locally, regionally, and the articles I've been writing attracted the attention of the Science Council, who invited me to go on that long-term part-time secondment with them, funded by the Gatsby Foundation. And what this did, I guess, is give me a national platform for two key issues for the technical community in the UK that I really wanted to change. One was the need for that positive culture, probably as you can recognise, given the examples that I've just shared with you. And another was the need for strategic sector understanding of the technical workforce and what we bring to research, innovation and education in this country, because that's really been lacking. And I've tried to drive those two things through with two key programmes, one called the Technician Commitment and one called the Talent Programme. I was just going to say a little bit about both. So the first initiative I introduced was something called the Technician Commitment. And the Technician Commitment was launched in 2017. And essentially, it's a pledge. We ask universities and research institutes to literally sign a one-page form that says they pledge to advance, conditions, culture, and so forth for their technical staff in their institution through four key pillars. And they are visibility, recognition, career development, and sustainability. I wasn't sure how I would get universities to sign up to this. I thought they're not going to listen to Kelly, the technician from Nottingham, but they would listen to a sector steering board with multiple, key players and organisations. And so I formed a sector steering board with a number of high-profile education organisations in the higher education system. And in 2017, 36 universities signed up to this when we launched it, and research institutions. It was amazing. And now, where are we 6 years later? The Technician Commitment stands at over 115 university and research institutes who are all committed to driving real change for their institutions. What's been wonderful too is that the Technician Commitment has always also seen great engagement from a number of sector stakeholder bodies. And I'm sure you'll recognise some of the logos on this page. Professional bodies, including the Royal Society of Chemistry, have got behind the Technician Commitment. So have funders, government organisations and so forth. It's been great to see. When a university signs the Technician Commitment, it's certainly not about just box ticking. They have to generate an action plan as to how they're going to deliver against those four key pillars, how they're going to improve recognition, visibility, career development and sustainability. And to date, we've seen over 100 action plans continue to be delivered across our signatory community. But we've also seen action plans be developed by some of our supporter organisations like the Royal Society, who've got behind it, and the Royal Society of Chemistry. And I've just given you these two examples of action plans because these organisations are really, really long-standing old organisations. And it's fantastic that we're getting wonderful support from them now for our community. But it's taken like 170 years to get to this point, which is, I wanted to sort of convey the leap that we've seen recently. UKRI are the biggest funder of research and innovation in this country. They too have signed the technician commitment and are enacting real change through the leverage and influence they can have on the higher education ecosystem through, changing things around whether technicians can apply for grants or sit on peer review panels, or asking institutions that they fund to demonstrate what they're doing for their technician commitment and so forth. So that's been wonderful to see. The technician commitment has also driven a lot of new research into the technical community, which has been super exciting because, as I mentioned, we'd really lacked that lack of sector understanding. And we've also been able to influence government policy. This is the Science Minister, Amanda Soloway, so she was like 2 or 3 science ministers ago, who has really got behind the technician commitment. And for the first time, we had a major government document, the UK Research and Development Roadmap, referenced technicians for the first time, and the technician commitment, which was exciting to see. And since then, the technician commitment's been able to influence lots of other areas of policy, including how we look at how we future assess sort of research in this country and how that translates into finances for our universities, a review of research bureaucracy, a national government R&P people and culture strategy, and REF 2028, which is how universities gain further funding for research and so forth. We've also worked with the Science Museum to develop a new permanent gallery at the Science Museum in London called Technicians. It's dedicated to technicians from all sectors, and for the first time we've got this dedicated sort of gallery in a museum, arguably the most famous science museum in the world, which is really exciting too. We've also just started to go international. The University of Sydney has just signed the technician commitment, and I think I've found the venue for our next conference here, funding permitting. There's been an awful lot of interest as to what we're doing here in the UK to really advocate technical skills, roles and careers, and it's been wonderful to share that information globally. 2 minutes, then that's great, thank you. I've just got a short film, if that's okay, to convey some of the impact of the technician commitment. It's quite dramatic, isn't it? I asked them to make it look like a film trailer, and I think they succeeded. I'm going to close very shortly. I guess what I just wanted to convey was that what the technician commitment has done is created an environment where we can actually seek further funding to support the technical community. And we've been really successful. We've managed to get a project called Talent, which you've heard from some of my colleagues today, I think in some of the workshops, for just under £5 million from Research England, so direct investment into the technical community. A key output from Talent was a National Policy Commission, which recommended the creation of a new entity, a new UK Institute for Technical Skills and Strategy. We've been successful in just receiving £5.5 million to establish that institute, so that project's live now too. The technician commitment too on its own has received over £600,000 from the Gatsby Foundation in funding. So I guess at the beginning of my career, where there wasn't a lot of investment in this space, you know, just in the space of 6 or 7 years, we've been able to attract almost £12 million worth of funding to really enact change for this community. I'll close there in the interest of time, but maybe we can talk further in the panel session about some of the work in this space. But thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the day.
So I promised about questions, but I'm conscious that Kelly is going to be joining our Q&A panel. So I think we'll move straight on to the Q&A panel and we'll do it all together. So if I could invite up the apprentices that are coming to join us, the ones who've done apprenticeships, onto the stage.
give the room a top tip. I'll put you on the
questioning why things are done certain ways, and actually advocating for what you need as well, because it's really hard sometimes for your employers to recognise that you don't necessarily have everything you need because of where you've started in the company and on your journey. So I think that's a really important point as well.
Okay. The next one.
I think for me, my top tip would be is to build like that strong relationship between yourself and your manager, and yourself and your training provider. So as soon as you've got that strong relationship, if you have busy workload, college or uni, you can go to your manager, they can help you delegate, and they know what you can and can't do, and it's just nice to have someone to lean on in busier times.
Yeah.
I think adding to those points, what I found was actually being proactive. So at the end of my level 3 apprenticeship, I was offered the chance to do a level 5 biomedical science apprenticeship. And I thought, well, I work in food. That's not really what I want to do. So then I looked for a course, level 6, food industry technical professional apprenticeship, that suited me a lot better, and my employers were happy with that. So kind of look for opportunities that suit you and suit your role.
I think in addition to what everyone said about like being willing and putting yourself forward, I think on the university side and the study side, I think really having set like study days if you can, if your employer allows you, that helps you keep you on track with your apprenticeship as well.
Yeah, I think.
I think I'll be mirroring a lot of what you guys have said actually, but for me, I think one of the most powerful things has been my network, but not just my internal network, my external network too. And I guess one way for you to, grow yours is to really engage with your professional body. A lot of people think they can't get engaged with their professional body until they're much more senior in their careers. That's absolutely not the case. Get engaged early and become part of that community. It's amazing the doors you can open. I'd also agree with stepping out of the comfort zone that you said. I think I certainly have had to do that every day, but it's certainly where the magic happens.
Okay, open up to the room. Is there any questions in the room? Anything you'd like to know?
It isn't a question, it's actually a point, just mirroring what you said, that so I've never actually been an apprentice, but I work with Tom Cheek at the Science Council now with Apprentice, but I've been a technician for 35 years, so I really am a fossil. I started in 1987, and I've worked all over the UK, but the interesting perspective for me was I've worked in America and Germany as well as a technician, and it comes back to what you guys were saying about advocacy, because I think that it's very easy as a technician to actually not speak up for what you think or know you need because you feel you don't have the right, and you do. And it's one of the reasons that I came into this. And what I'd say in that regard is I worked as a technician in America, and it was a completely different landscape. Being American, there was no problem. Technicians or anyone basically promoting themselves and putting themselves out there. So what I'd say is believe in yourself, and also realise that you have the permission, you have the right to speak up for what you know you need.
Okay, any other questions in the room? Any thoughts? Yeah, you've got a question. We've got two questions there, and then at the front, sir.
Cheers. I just wanted to ask, because there's sort of two sides to the apprenticeship. You've got your sort of education side and your work side. Did you find it hard to balance between the two? Did you have to prioritise one as an experience in terms of, did you want to get a better mark out of your results, or did you want more experience from your job? How do you sort of balance those two?
So I think, especially where I work can come with peaks and troughs. And when it's a peak of work and then you're at the end of the uni year, it can be quite busy. But scientists are normally pretty interested in what you're doing at uni. And if you tell them, I've got this module coming up, it's got an exam to finish with, one of the scientists said to me, let's link it with what we're doing in the lab. Let's have a look, see how the theory links, and then if you need to take time out of the lab, we can sit together and do it and help you get through it. But yeah, a lot of them are very supportive, and it is, I think to begin with, it can be tricky to balance, but once you get those relationships, they are very happy to help you and link it in as strongly as they can.
I guess the other point that I'd make on that is time blocking is so effective when it comes to that work-study-life balance. And my colleagues always laugh at me because I always list it as work-study-life because you have to plan all of them to a certain extent when you're doing an apprenticeship. But having those designated days or a designated set of hours where you can just get your head down, do your studying, set up the right environment for yourself to do it, is something that personally for me I find, because I can't work in a busy environment, it just doesn't work for me. But equally, there's this, my favourite tip for getting study or even work sometimes done is on most people's laptop there will be a helpful little focus button down in the bottom corner, which I use quite a lot just to block out all my email notifications, all my Teams notifications and everything, just to be able to get my head down. But equally on the time blocking side of things, I use it in my life as well. So I know that on a Sunday morning, that's my laundry prep for the rest of the week, do all my meal preps and everything. So it works in study and in life and in your work time as well. But most employers are pretty flexible. And I know that I keep my study day flexible so that if something does pop up, I will flip it around for someone else, but just make sure that I get the time back in kind at some point in a later date. And usually my managers are quite accommodating of that. For example, I'm here today. Today would normally be my study day, but actually I've now flipped it around to Monday. So it does work.
If I can just add, I mean, one of the things was you're talking about was presentation skills. You know, it's really important standing up in front of people. And one of the apprentices I managed found it very useful to actually do a presentation to the team within a few months of starting about what the apprenticeship was. And it really helped the team understand what they needed. And it also fitted in with their work. So it reminded them, because not everybody knows if you're on an apprenticeship and you need the time necessarily to, so maybe you're more working and things. But if you speak to the team and explain what you're doing and the benefits and everything, they can help you, support you with the time as well, make sure you get it. So just one thing worthwhile. So I think there's a lady at the front had a question.
I was just wondering if any of you guys moved from one company to a different company after you finished the apprenticeship, or if you went from like a different sector in the company, how transferable did you find that your skills were that you got from the apprenticeship versus like someone who would do normal uni? Did you find that you progressed quicker than other people?
So is anyone here moved on this? Yes.
I've not moved companies, but I moved from totally different sites within CPI. So the first site was very small, and that's where I started my level 3, and then I moved into my level 6, which was a much bigger site. And I found it very transferable. I did find it very helpful, however, to sit with my manager and go through skills that I was very comfortable with in my last job, that I could transfer very easily, because it can be missed, and down the line you go, I can do this. So if you go in saying, this is what I can do, this is what I'm confident in, this is how can I help you, and it does get your foot in the door a little bit better.
for me, I guess the same. I did a switch internally in the company where I transferred out of chemistry and decided that I was going to be an engineer for a year, which I love engineering. Props to anyone that can do it, if there's anyone in the room that can do it, because it wasn't for me. But all the skills tend to be pretty transferable, and actually one of the biggest things that helps you out in terms of an apprenticeship is you always remember that huge growth curve you were on when you first started your apprenticeship. So whenever you shift roles into a completely different area, you sort of remember what that growth curve looks like, and it really helps you through. And the skills all tend to be transferable and the same, because they're mostly soft skills that you need to get your foot in the door to really be able to upskill quickly into a new area.
Okay, so we've got some questions from our online audience.
Yeah, we have. We've got a couple kind of asking your advice or top tips on a couple of matters. So the first one is, how do you best navigate an unsupportive training officer?
Right, who'd like to who's brave for that question?
I'll go for this one, shall I? So switching within CPI did mean that I had a whole new manager, and I had a bit of an issue where my manager was in a whole different team to me. So it's like working in HR, but I was being managed by someone in IT. So it really made it hard getting work. So I was brave enough and I just went to HR and I sat with them. I just put in a private call, 30 minutes, went through all my reasoning, and I just said to them, I was like, this is not negatively towards our manager, we just don't work well together. And it did eventually get sorted, and I get a lot more work now, which is good. But yeah, that's what I did. I think you just kind of have to be brave, and if you explain it to your HR, they'll understand.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say if it's kind of something outside the workplace, so maybe the more uni side of things or anything like that. Again, somebody earlier said about having a good relationship with your manager is super, super important, and then reiterating that your managers are on your team, they're on your side, so when you have any issues, they should be the people that you feel comfortable going to, and they're on your team, they'll fight that battle with you if there is an issue. So I think, you know, chatting to your managers, your team, people you feel comfortable with. If you have a buddy, so in our company, most younger apprentices and older ones have a buddy who's maybe further along the scheme, you know, reach out to them for support and advice, and your kind of apprentice network as well, because somebody maybe faces a similar issue and can point you in the right direction, or somebody might kind of know where to go next. And then I think with that, another important side is also the mental health side. So a lot of companies also have support from that perspective if it's kind of had an impact on you and you'd like to just talk about it and find more kind of internal or external support. That's also something important to consider, because that kind of training provider side of things does take a toll on it. It's a big part of your life at this stage.
Okay, and do we have another question?
Yeah, we do. Thank you for that. Another online question is, do you have any tips for apprenticeship burnout?
Is anybody feeling burned out?
I think the first thing to say on this thing is I think every apprentice in this room at some point in their apprenticeship will experience apprentice burnout. We do tend to be high achievers by nature and therefore push ourselves extremely, extremely hard. And in my case, it resulted in an anxiety diagnosis, which was really fun. But I'm in a better place now and I have a lot more advice for it. But I think one of the first things that I'd say is really have that network built around you so that when something does happen, you know that the people around you have your back. For example, I was trying to push myself really hard a couple of months ago to try and be able to sit 2 exams this exam sitting. And it basically wound up with me pushing myself so hard to the point that I had a 10 o'clock at night call with my lab supervisor going, I just don't think I can do this. I can't push myself to get the coursework done in time. And he was really helpful and really rational with me and just went, look, you're doing an exam. It doesn't matter. Just, it's out the window. It's done. Don't worry about it. I'll handle it on Monday. Just move on. Calm down, we will get it sorted, and the weight of the burden does not fall on you to help in getting it sorted. because we have you. And I think those are some of the really important things that it comes to sometimes, is just making sure that you do have that network and those people around you who can really say to you, look, we've got you.
I suppose I'd say if you don't feel comfortable going to your manager, there should or will be someone at the company that you can confide in and say to them, I'm struggling, I can't do it anymore, can you help me? And either they'll take it to your manager discreetly and they'll get you that support, or my other top tip is just use your annual leave. You will thank yourself for it. Even if you don't have anything to do, take an afternoon off, have a bath, and you will feel a lot better for it.
Okay, so another question from online.
A lot of the situations that we're put in my workplace as apprentices are completely new to us, if that's a scientific experience or it's a workplace issue. I've looked back on some other ways I've approached situations in my apprenticeship and thought, oh, with everything I know now, I would have done that completely differently. How do you handle the feeling of not knowing enough and only maybe having one viewpoint that you're provided with to go off? For example, what my manager tells me. So just like widening your network to ensure that you've got a full view of situations in a career that we're very, very new to.
Okay.
I think I can relate to that because I started working at the university straight out of school, and it was come to the point like it was like lunch times and like people would make like these science jokes and I'd be like, I don't know what they mean. But I think as you get more experience, you do start to understand more, but don't be afraid to ask questions when you're in those situations, and 9 times out of 10 someone will always like be happy to tell you why something means what it does. And just making use of the people around you, whether that be like your team, if you're in the university, like students, postdocs, PhDs, anyone like that.
Yeah, I'd just say, I guess, everyone you're working with, everyone around you, you're working with them, so it benefits them as much as you to be open and honest about if you don't know something, if you do need help with something. So just, yeah, be honest, and if you need help, ask for it.
I think something that's benefited me over the course of my career is identifying people to sort of informally mentor me. I think those informal mentors can be really, really powerful. So I've got 2 or 3 colleagues across this institution who I would talk to if I was uncomfortable. I don't understand either. But also I've got a couple of colleagues externally who are my go-to people, for advice and so forth if I find myself in a slightly tricky situation. And I think when we talk about mentoring, of course, most the formal mentorship sort of relationship is very important, but actually you can be mentored every day in a very informal way, and that's usually beneficial too.
I suppose one last thing for me is if you're in the lab and you're doing something and the scientist is very busy and you don't feel comfortable saying, can you just clarify that? I've got into this habit now of starting a new project. I'll just put in an hour where the scientist looks free, book a little meeting room and just say planning chat or general chat. And you can go over it and you can go to as much detail as you want. And because you're just one-on-one with them, you don't have that pressure and you don't feel almost embarrassed about not knowing it. So you have that comfortable environment, bring some biscuits, have a cup of tea, and just talk about it. And that's been really helpful to me. And I've even been doing it with like placement students because the scientist is too busy, but the placement student understands. So we'll just sit together, chat about it, and it is massively helpful.
I just want to pick up on Kelly's point a little bit further in the sense that mentorship is such a powerful thing, but don't just think that you have to have a mentor for the science, because I got into that habit for a really long time of just thinking that I needed a mentor for the science aspects of things. But actually, since then, every time I look at someone, I'm like, oh, I just really wish that I had that skill that you really clearly have, and I just know that I don't. I go up and I approach them and I'm like, can we have a couple of sessions where the two of us just sit down and we go through approaching this thing and how you approach it? For example, one of my big things was actually, how do you occupy a space in a meeting room and actually feel that you are valid in the questions that you're asking? And actually, my mentor for that actually just got a whole bunch of random people in a meeting room, sat around and discussed a project that was completely foreign to me and made me ask questions about it and sit there and just made me do it until I was comfortable doing it. So having people like that who will just sit with you, spend their time and just help you with some of the skills that you want that you know you don't have, it's really important.
Conscious of the time, so last point then, and then move on to the next.
Yeah, just a quick one. So a key thing is that I think, especially at the start of apprenticeships, imposter syndrome is very common, and it's okay. I think most people go through it. I went through it, and you quickly come to learn that we're in one of these industries and fields where everything's always changing and developing. So it's not just you that's always learning. Everyone's always on their toes and always learning to keep up with everything. And a lot of the time, everyone's just as confused as you are. Or if you work in a very specialist area and you're listening to a talk on something completely different, it's actually 9 times out of 10 not just you that has no idea what's going on. So I think it's feeling at peace with that, feeling comfortable and knowing you're not the only one that feels this way. And if you're at the start of your apprenticeship, the way I see it is, after the 4 years, 5 years, however long, you've got so much time to have that level of knowledge and reach that end goal. Just picture yourself at the very end and what you know, and before you know it, you'll be there and you won't even remember, how it was when you first started.
Okay, thank you for that. Hopefully you found it very useful and very helpful, the questions. Can you please help Julia, thank you.